Hello, my name is Marsha Volk Bugalla. I'm with the firm of Frost Brown Todd. Today we're going to be talking about bullying, how to recognize it, how to prevent it, and how to deal with it. We're primarily going to be discussing what I refer to as traditional bullying. We will not be discussing cyberbullying. My colleague Tom Wheeler has another segment dealing with that. We're going to begin briefly with some background, and then we're going to talk about why bullying is a problem, recognizing it, preventing it, and dealing with it. A very nuts and bolts approach that I hope will be helpful to you day to day in dealing with this problem. I think we are all aware of how significant bullying is in our schools. It used to be, oh, kids will be kids, boys will be boys. Not the case anymore. We've come to recognize how serious, how damaging bullying can be to our children, and the serious liability that schools can encounter by ignoring it, by failing to try and prevent it. As you probably all know, Indiana Code 20-33-8-0.2 defines bullying. It is defined as overt, repeated acts or gestures. Let's stop there a moment. These words are all very important. Overt, meaning it's obvious, repeated more than once, including verbal or written communications, physical acts, or any other behaviors committed by a student or a group of students against another student with the intent to harass, to ridicule, to humiliate, to intimidate, or harm the other student. Just that definition indicates that we are talking about very serious, damaging behavior. Bullying, to expand upon that definition, is aggressive behavior. Once again, that is intentional, and this is very important. Involves an imbalance of power or strength. It is repeated over time. In other words, the one incident of my calling you a name is not bullying. It also may take many forms, such as hitting or punching, which is physical bullying, and candidly is sometimes more often seen with younger children. Teasing or name-calling, which is verbal bullying. Intimidation using gestures or social exclusion, this is referred to as nonverbal or emotional bullying. This is frequently seen, unfortunately, by girls against other girls, frequently in middle school, but not certainly exclusively. And sending insulting messages by email or electronic means, cyberbullying. If you come away from today's session with nothing else, please remember this. Bullying is abuse. It is not conflict. It is no different than domestic abuse, child abuse, because it involves people who are not similar in strength. It is not conflict. Again, this is something that's very important to remember. This is why it is a significant issue which must be addressed in our schools. Indiana Code requires that your school discipline rules, which as you know every school must have, must prohibit bullying. Wouldn't it be wonderful if simply saying that solved the problem? We all know that that is just the beginning, but it is a beginning that you must have. Consequences of bullying. Why do we worry about this? Why do we care about it? A student cannot learn if she or he does not feel safe. We cannot begin to think that we have safe schools if bullying is occurring. And I will tell you, if you have a school, you have bullying. It is extremely prevalent. Children who are bullied are more likely than other children to be depressed, lonely, anxious, to have low self-esteem, feel unwell, think about suicide. Now, if you stop for a moment and contemplate that, first of all, how can any child who is experiencing those feelings, who is being abused on a constant, perhaps daily basis, begin to be able to learn? Schools are about education. You can't do it if your kids are being bullied. Second of all, just on a humanitarian, moral basis, we need to keep our children safe. We do not want our children being abused in our schools. Students who are bullied fear going to school. They fear going to the bathroom, riding the school bus. If we have children who try not to come to our schools because they don't feel safe, once again, we cannot even begin the educational process. We also need to remember there's more than one student involved. Frequently, there is so much attention paid to the child who's the victim, and rightfully so. But we need to remember the child who's doing the bullying, because that child, as we're going to discuss, is having problems. That child is showing marked antisocial behavior that needs to be addressed. Bullying can be a sign of other serious antisocial or even violent behavior. Children who bully are more likely than others to get into frequent fights. Then they're more likely to be injured in a fight, to vandalize, to steal property, to drink alcohol, to smoke, to be truant from school, to drop out of school, carry a weapon. All of these things are obvious, serious problems in the school. If we can help not only to prevent it by dealing with the bullying activity, but perhaps to salvage that child, to prevent that child from going down a road of serious, violent behavior, you've really accomplished a great deal. And that clearly has to be part of education. Bullying also has an impact on the other students in the school who are bystanders. It creates a climate of fear, of disrespect, and has a negative impact on all children. Think about it. If you're watching someone being bullied, you may be grateful that it's not you who's being bullied, but you're also going to wonder, when might I be next? And that creates a fearful atmosphere. It also creates an atmosphere where if we allow that behavior to continue, where all forms of disrespect appear, at least to the students, to be acceptable. Some of the general characteristics of children who bully, and again, we're speaking in generalities. Every situation is different. Every child is unique and individual. But I think these may be helpful to you in recognizing some of the behaviors and to begin to think, is this a child who's participating in bullying? And again, we're focusing not just on the victim, but on the perpetrator. Frequently, these are children who are impulsive, hot-headed, a lack of empathy. They don't care about anybody else's pain. These are children who because of a lack of empathy, as you are all probably very well aware, have other problems because of that disconnect with the world around them. These may also be children that you see will abuse pets and animals, which is always a significant indicator of possible serious problem. They obviously have difficulty conforming to the rules, and they have positive attitudes toward violence. As we mentioned earlier, these are children who are more likely to get into fights, and if you're in a fight, you're more apt to be injured in a fight. Boys who were identified as bullies in middle school were 4 times as likely to have more than one criminal conviction by age 24. Think about that. Think about the cost to society. Think about the cost to the school in which they've been all those years up to the age of 24. Children who bully are more likely to have friends who bully or who have positive attitudes toward violence. That simply makes sense. You gravitate toward people with a common view of the world. Research indicates that children who bully are not socially isolated. They report having an easier time making friends than children who do not bully, and usually have a small group of friends who support and encourage their bullying. How many times have we seen that? A group of kids where one guy is the bully and all his little friends are there to back him up, to encourage him. We even see that in the Harry Potter movies. Research also indicates that children who bully have average or above average self-esteem. This is an extremely important, crucial point to remember. These are children who are feeling pretty good about themselves. We don't have to worry about their self-esteem. What does that mean? And we'll talk about this later. But it means that interventions that focus on trying to increase the self-esteem of children who bully are doomed to failure. They will not be effective. We don't want to spend our time, our precious resources, and part of our precious resources include your time, in an intervention which we know will not be effective. Children who bully are more likely to live in homes where, and some of these I think are almost mutually exclusive, but it's interesting to know this, a lack of warmth and involvement on the part of their parents, an overly permissive parent who sets no limits, a lack of supervision by parents, and this one I think is very interesting, harsh physical discipline and a model for bullying. In other words, at home they have a parent who is in fact a bully, and they see this as acceptable behavior. These are also children who may be told, it's okay to be a bully, you're a big guy, go out there, be a tough guy, take care of yourself. I'm sure all of you have heard that. These are the types of situations that can incubate bullying. Warning signs. Not only might you see this when you observe children in school, you may hear other children tell you about this. You may hear staff members tell you about it. And importantly, you may hear this from parents who may not realize that bullying is occurring. Children sometimes are very, very hesitant to tell any adult that they are being bullied. That's why it's important to look at these warning signs. Now, I'm very aware of the fact that these warning signs can be warnings of lots of things, not just bullying. They may be warnings of child abuse, of abuse by a parent or other adult. We don't know You don't know until you look into these matters what's going on. The point is, these are serious signs that something is amiss. For example, having torn, damaged, missing pieces of clothing, books, or belongings. Unexplained cuts, bruises, and scratches. Has few, if any, friends with whom he or she spends time. Seems afraid to go to school. Walking to and from school, or riding the school bus, or even taking part in any kind of organized activity. This is a child who is being or is isolated. Takes a long, illogical route when walking to or from school. This is obvious. It's trying to avoid being bullied to and from school. Has lost interest in schoolwork or suddenly begins to do poorly in school. Now this is an indication of so many things. It can be an indication of problems at home, an indication of drug use, many things. So obviously, if you see this, you're not going to necessarily know what the problem is, what the root cause is, but it indicates to you that someone needs to be paying some attention. The child may appear to be sad, moody, depressed, coming home or while at school. Complains frequently of stomach aches or headaches, anything to get out of coming to school. Has trouble sleeping, frequent bad dreams, a loss of appetite, appears anxious and suffers from low self-esteem. Again, note the difference. The victim is probably going to suffer from self-esteem problems. The perpetrator is not. That once again is that imbalance of strength, the imbalance of power. Prevention. If we could, we would wave a magic wand and make sure this all went away. And there was never any badness in our schools, and the kids all got along, and everybody was happy. That's the goal of prevention. You all obviously know, and I'm not foolish enough to think otherwise, prevention is aspirational. Prevention is also constant and ongoing. Here are some of the hallmarks, I think, the keystones of prevention: a policy, a program, and practice. As we said, every school has to have a policy prohibiting bullying. You have to set up programs to address and implement the prevention of bullying. And while you can have a program, unless you put it into practice, it's never going to help. Let's talk about some of this. The single most important part of any prevention program is truly setting up a social climate in each and every school building regarding bullying, that it is unacceptable and will not be tolerated, and that each and every child is entitled to respect and a safe environment. Again, that is the bedrock of any successful program. In order to do this, you have to involve everyone in your school: teachers, administrators, counselors, nurses, librarians, bus drivers, custodians, cafeteria workers, the students, and the parents. Everybody. Many of these people, your custodians, for example, see things no one else will see. They need to understand the importance of preventing the bullying and dealing with it, reporting it if they see it. They have to buy into the concept. It is absolutely unacceptable. A lot of experts suggest that an anonymous questionnaire be devised. It's easy to find these online, and given to the students so that they can let you know what their perceptions are. We all know as adults, sometimes we don't quite know everything that's going on. The kids know. And if the kids are given an environment, again, that's anonymous, to report, maybe it's happening, maybe it's just their perception. Either way, as adults, you need to know this. And so a first step, not only in gathering information, but in giving the impression, very important, that bullying is significant, is to disseminate these questionnaires. Well, then what do you do with them? A lot of researchers suggest that a group needs to be formed, perhaps in each building, to coordinate the school's bullying prevention activities. These work best if the group is representative of all the stakeholders in the school. And this probably would involve an administrator, a teacher from each grade, a member of the non-teaching staff, such as a custodian, a school counselor or other school-based mental health professional, a parent, and depending on the age of the kids involved, the school, to have students on this group. What else does a prevention program require? And again, everything that's implemented has to involve the group. Otherwise, why bother with it? You have so few resources. You must use them all wisely. If you're going to get people involved in a prevention group, they have to have something to do, something that feels meaningful and purposeful, and hopefully produces results. Part of that is training the staff. This includes what we're talking about today: recognizing, preventing bullying, and how to intervene when they see it. This will help your staff better understand the nature, the causes of bullying, its effects, and to really understand why this cannot be ignored. You also have to establish and enforce the school rules. That's much more than just your policy. That really entails what happens when there's bullying. These rules have to be posted. They have to be discussed with the students and the parents. And this should be more than one time. Oh, gee, at the beginning of the year, along with everything else we tell the kids, like where their lockers are, where the lunchroom is, we'll throw in a little blurb about bullying. Not enough. It has to be much more focused, and it has to be significantly reinforced throughout the year. It also has to be discussed with the parents so they can understand it and buy into what the school is trying to do. This is also one of the things you can do with the questionnaire. When you get the results, to share those with the parents, to share those with the student body, with the staff, and say, here's what we've learned. Now, here's what we're going to try and do. And constantly, there must be the reinforcement for the fact disrespectful behavior in any form, not just bullying, is absolutely not to be tolerated. One of the other practical things that you can do is find the hot spots, those sort of nooks and crannies in your school building that can be hot spots for bullying. Many of our schools have surveillance cameras, and these are extremely helpful. But let's face it, we don't have cameras everywhere. We don't have cameras, I certainly hope, in the bathrooms, in the locker rooms. Plus, our kids ferret out all the little places where they think we're not. You have to make sure that every place in your building, on your campus, is safe, that you've got eyes and ears there. Then you have to intervene consistently and appropriately when bullying does occur, when you see it, or when it's reported. There is nothing worse than ignoring it. You cannot find a more effective way to undermine all of your efforts than to ignore it, because the kids will know. If it's observed, if it's suspected, if it's reported, it can never, never be ignored. Not only are you fomenting it, are you making children unsafe, you are also subjecting each of you and the school to significant liability. Ignoring it fosters it. Intervention. Because no matter how hard we try with preventing it, it's going to happen. And so often, what we do when we see it counts for so much. That is frequently a teachable moment, and lots of little eyes and ears are going to be paying attention. First of all, when bullying is reported, it must be investigated thoroughly and appropriately, as would any kind of abuse. And when we investigate, you're going to want to remember to protect the child, every child's confidentiality, to protect against retaliation, and to make sure you're thorough to try and figure out who, what, when, where, and why. Now, if you see bullying, you're walking down the hall, you're on the playground, you're at the bus stop, and you see it, here are some thoughts. First, stop the bullying. Stand between the child or children and those who are being bullied. This puts your body between them and immediately gives the child being bullied protection. You're going to want to make appropriate eye contact. Don't send any of the students away. All the kids who may be bystanders or who may be egging this behavior on need to see and hear what is occurring. Also, and this can be very hard, don't ask about or discuss the reasons for the bullying or try to sort out the facts. So often that's our first instinct. All right, what's going on here? You know what's going on. You know that something inappropriate is going on. No explanations. It stops. You want to use a matter-of-fact tone or voice and state the behaviors that you saw or heard. Let the students know that bullying is unacceptable and against the rules. I've got examples here in this slide. Calling someone named is bullying. It is unacceptable. It is not tolerated. It must stop. Those sorts of very clear messages. You have to be very careful also about how you support the child that has been bullied. That child needs to regain control to save face. You want to be very careful about too much overprotectiveness, too much giving a hug, you poor thing. You don't want to do anything that will inadvertently and unintentionally humiliate that child further. You simply want to make the child feel safe and protected. Now, that doesn't mean that later on You don't speak to the child who was bullied in private, especially to see if the child is upset. But at the time, you do not want the child who's been bullied, while he or she is facing the bullier, to try and explain what happened. That can be very, very uncomfortable, especially in front of other students. He or she can tell you later what happened, all right? You're also going to have to make sure there is sufficient supervision that retaliation does not occur, not only by the child who did that bullying. Frequently, that child will stop, but his friends may keep on doing it. You have to make sure there is appropriate supervision so that the child who has been victimized is not further victimized. And you have to be careful about how the supervision is done. Again, if it's too overt, it's just going to further humiliate the child who's already been humiliated. You want to include the bystanders in your conversation and help to give them guidance about what was or was not appropriately done. For example, if they are egging on the behavior, you're going to want to say, stop it. Your behavior, what you are saying, what you are doing is wrong. It is inappropriate. It will not be tolerated. If, on the other hand, they tried to help, then you can offer encouragement. I know you were trying to do the right thing. I know you were thinking in the right way. Thank you for your help and support. If you send them away immediately, they miss that teachable moment, that opportunity for you to reinforce what is right and what is wrong. If appropriate, you want to impose immediate consequences for students who bully. Now, you may have to investigate some more. You may have to look into this more deeply to find out how long it's been going on. And so consequences may not be appropriate right there and then. But what you can say is, I'm going to look into this. More will follow. Do not make the child who was doing the bullying apologize to the victim. That's only going to exacerbate that situation. It's going to make the child who was doing the bullying ticked, mad, and it's going to further humiliate the victim. It is not appropriate. Consequences need to be logical. They need to be connected to the offense. Let the students who bully know that you are watching them and their friends. And then you again have to notify your colleagues, teachers, custodians, other people in the building who interact with these students need to be aware of what happened. Coaches, other extracurricular sponsors. Let people know so they can be eyes and ears for you as well, and add to the feeling of safety that the victim will have, and the fact that the child doing the bullying knows that he or she's been shut down. It also sends the message again to the rest of the student body, this will not be tolerated. Do not require these students to meet and work it out. This goes along with our statement earlier. This is abuse, not conflict. When you bring children together to say, oh, let's resolve your conflict, let's try and work it out, implicit in that is that both sides are right, both sides are wrong. Let's talk about your conflict. Let's mediate it. Let's come to some resolution. That is not what we're talking about here. We are talking about abuse. The victim has nothing to apologize for. All right? Don't mediate this. It will not work, and it will further traumatize the victim. You don't necessarily want the bullier to apologize to the victim either. That can make the victim feel very nervous, make them feel, oh my gosh, I'm sitting here, this guy's been forced to apologize to me, he is going to kill me later. All right? Don't do it. There may be other consequences, other ways of making an amends that make sense in all the circumstances, but not an apology. What you really want to have happen is the behavior to stop. Sometimes just this immediate teachable moment is obviously not enough, and there is a lot more that has to be gone into. Why is this child bullying? How often has this gone on? What can we do to address the root causes? What can we do to help the victim, to empower that victim? Let's help the victim to participate in activities, to garner friends, to feel more self-esteem. That helps to prevent bullying as well. This may require bringing in the parents. It may require mental health intervention. Each situation is different, but you need to deal with each one thoroughly and completely. Here are some interventions that really focus on the child who has been bullied. Again, don't offer too much support in public. In other words, every time you see that child, you don't necessarily want to walk up, put your arm around his or her shoulders and go, how's it going, honey? Is everything all right? Because 100 pairs of eyes are watching that. And now that child has just been made to feel further isolated, humiliated, and as though a spotlight was shining on him. Now, you may offer that kind of comfort in private, but you have to be very careful about it in public. Spend time with that student. Learn what's been going on. What's going on in his or her life? How pervasive has this bullying been? These may be difficult conversations, and it may not happen all at one time. It may happen over time. You may need to involve your counselor, someone who can really establish a rapport with this child. Praise the child for the courage to talk about it, and hopefully the courage to report it if it continues. You want to keep the child advised of what you're doing, what's happening to the other child. Now, we all have certain constraints here because there's only so much information about another child that you can give to another student or the student's parents. But you can talk about the fact that there are interventions, that you are doing things, that you are working on making sure the child is safe. You can talk about what the staff is doing to monitor the hallways, things like that, so that the child is not surprised by your activities and begins to have confidence in what you're doing. This also is important with parents. If parents have reported the bullying, you can bet they're going to be watching you to see what are you doing now to keep my child safe. Your failure to follow through is what subjects a school to liability. It is not whether you picked the right method that is as troublesome. I would much rather be in court, if we have to be in court at all, and say, here's what the school did, and here's why the school believed it was reasonable. And then argue about, well, the parent didn't think you did enough, or the parent thought you should have done that. That's okay. We can handle that. What we can't handle is if you ignore it and you've done nothing. Again, you want to Communicate with your colleagues about the bullying, what you're doing, and what they should do about it. And you may have other colleagues also talk to the child who was bullied to again give the child the feeling of safety and that lots of people are involved. Help the child to make friends. When children are not isolated, when they have other friends around them who can stand up to bullies, that's going to help to stop it. We all know not all of our parents will be supportive. And again, you may run into the parent who says, you know what, I'm going to teach Johnny how to do self-defense, and if that bully comes up to him again, he's going to sock him in the nose. Well, you need to try and work with that parent. First of all, that kind of violent response is clearly unacceptable and inappropriate, and it's going to get little Johnny in trouble. All right? You may have to spend considerable time with the parent working on what are the most appropriate ways to deal with this. A mental health referral may be necessary. This child may also have other issues going on. Depending on how pervasive this bullying has been, may have a child who is dealing with some serious depression. Obviously, we want to try and intervene early on before anything serious or untoward occurs. Also because this helps a child learn. As we said early on, if a child is depressed, a child's not going to be able to learn. The next thing is that you're going to have to spend, as we've said, considerable time, if appropriate, with the child who has been bullied, to make sure over time they are able to vent their feelings, obtain support, and hopefully regain a sense of control in the life around them. You then need, of course, to focus on students who bully. They are going to need help in recognizing their behavior, why it's wrong, what's wrong with it, and to help them begin to build the skills so that they will avoid bullying in the future. Things not to do. Now, this is a very touchy issue. Consequences, discipline. I'm not for a moment suggesting to you that inappropriate behavior ought not to be disciplined. What I am suggesting to you, though, is suspension and expulsion is not the long-term solution. Many schools have zero-tolerance policies or 3 strikes and you're out policies. First of all, because bullying is so pervasive, you can be suspending and expelling an awful lot of students. Now, how is that ever helpful? How does that get those students to learn, to get past this? It doesn't. I do understand, though, and I would never for a moment suggest that you do not suspend or expel a child where appropriate to keep a school safe. What I am suggesting to you, it's not the be-all and it's not the end-all. That child will return to school and perhaps no better off. Child's going to be mad at the victim, whom he is going to see as the one who got him kicked out of school. Plus, you've not addressed the bullying behaviors. Additionally, and I think this is something that is very important and we may not always think of, when adults even know that there can be serious consequences, such as expulsion and suspension, they may not report the bullying. They may believe, oh, I'm so-and-so's teacher, I'll just handle it. I really don't want the child expelled. And then you as the administrator don't know about it. Perhaps it's not being dealt with appropriately. So that can be a very serious unintended consequence of a zero-tolerance policy. Because bullying is the early marker of other behaviors, it truly needs to be addressed more significantly, more deeply, than just simply throwing the kid out of school, because you've not addressed the behaviors. You've not tried to do anything to prevent that kind of behavior from happening again. Maybe that child will stop bullying little Johnny, but it doesn't mean he's going to stop bullying. It doesn't mean he's going to stop being in fights. It doesn't mean that he is going to stop viewing violence as an appropriate way of dealing with behavior. Peer mediation, as we have said earlier, is not effective. Not only is it not effective, it can be truly ineffective and make a serious situation worse. Because bullying is a form of victimization, you cannot mediate it. It sends an inappropriate message to students. Mediation implies you're a little right, you're a little wrong. No one is a little right or a little wrong in victimization. The bullier is wrong. That's all there is to it. Again, it can re-victimize, re-traumatize the child who's been bullied, who doesn't want to be in the same room, sitting across the table from this person who's bullied them. And there is also, because of all of these reasons, no evidence in the research that it is even effective. So why spend your time on something that not only may be problematic, but is a waste of time? The conclusion: the creation of a safe, supportive school environment is not a one-time effort. It is a long-term, bedrock commitment that is part of the culture of your school, where you can't imagine not focusing on it in whatever creative ways you devise, so that you do everything reasonable to keep your children safe. Thank you very much.